Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, episode number 23. I am one of your co-hosts, Keith, along with my co-host, JD. Today, we are going to cover a little bit about the summer workouts for the Iowa men's and women's basketball teams and the replacement for Ed Podolak in the broadcasting booth. And then at the end, we will cover a little bit about the Big 10 schedule like we did last week. This time we're going to go a little more in depth, not too deep, kind of go over the projected records of each team, talk a couple of games, a couple of important games. We'll each give our own opinion. We're not going to go into every single game. I don't think that's important. The main thing is the overall records and who we think is going to win the conference, going to appear in the Big 10 title game. So let's start it off with a little bit of chatter about Pat Angerer replacing Eddie Podolak in broadcasting booth. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's great hire. Of course, I wasn't there when they were going through their tests. You know, when they test them. The only thing about Pat Angerer, and he's a very, very excitable Hawkeye. You could just tell the way he's been as a player. But the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous is when, you know, things get a little exciting and there might be something said that he may not be able to take back.
Yeah,
it's not going to offend me, but that's, you know, there's people that don't want to hear that, and that's fine. But yeah, if he can keep it under, you know, keep it somewhat calm, I think he's a great hire, and I think he's going to do a good job. I really do. And really, the other three guys, you couldn't have been hurt on any one of those three. I think they were excellent choices.
Not at all.
It's just picking the cream of those three or four, and Pat got it. And congratulations to Pat, and I'm looking forward to hearing him in the fall.
Yep.
Your thoughts?
The thing, to me is it's nice to have a defensive presence up in that booth with Ed in there. Offensive presence for the however many years it's been. It's basically my entire life almost. It'd be nice to get a little bit of that defensive perspective. But the other thing that I'm really interested in is I know Pat Angerer is really great friends with Brett Greenwood. And I'm really interested in hearing some of the stories. I think he'll have some stories to share about progress. And, because we haven't really seen a lot out of that since that emotional intro that night. I don't remember who they played that night. Was that the Pittsburgh game? When Iowa beat Pittsburgh on that 57-yard field goal. I think that's the night it was. It's not something that you can really find a lot on the internet. Now, might have been a Big 10 network presentation on that with his great friendship with Brett. But yeah, I'm interested in hearing how he's doing. He's just such a freak thing that happened to him, and it's sad what happened to him because he had a full life in front of him. Now he's struggling to get back, or he's working his way back. He's had to fight to get his way back to where he's at now, and kudos to him for fighting through that. But it's just a sad situation to be in. But I'm interested in that, and I think that would be a great, that's going to be a great hire, like you said. And again, I agree with you completely. Any of the other three would have been great as well. Different perspectives on the game. So I think they hit a home run. They could have hit a home run with any of them, honestly.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I agree. Oh, and happy Father's Day to everybody out there. I want to make sure I get that in there.
Yes.
That's one of the things we talked about
Father's
earlier.
Day.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers, and hope you're enjoying yourself, getting some grilling done and enjoying yourself. That's what Father's Day is about.
You and I got the privilege of going down and working for ours yesterday.
Yeah.
But
okay.
They need the help, and we're willing to do it. So
yeah.
All right. So what do you say we talk about? Lifting that tiller around your truck was not easy either. Let's say we talk a little bit about the summer workouts. Well, if you need help, just let me know.
No, it's fine. I get it.
I've seen some pictures come out and some video come out. We'll talk a little bit about the men on first. The video I did see come out was I like to see the leadership coming out of Brock Harding. He was a very vocal leader at the end of that meeting or at the end of that practice or workout session. I like seeing that. It sounds like, he's got the look of a guy that really wants to take that step forward this year. Obviously, there's a big step from your freshman to your sophomore year. In most cases, you're acclimated to the rigors of the schedule. You're acclimated to going to classes and what the class schedule is like. So having him with a year under his belt and having that vocal leadership, I think is only going to help the team going into the 2024-25 season.
Yeah, Fran probably pulled him aside and said, you need to be more of a vocal leader. You need to take this team under your wing and lead. And I think he's probably decided that my sophomore year, I've been here, I can do it. And I'm happy to see it. Anybody that wants to be a leader, and if they can lead the team and put them under their wing and move them forward, I'm very happy for that.
Yeah. And I think there's a comfort level when you're 1 year into the program. You feel a little bit more relaxed in being able to say what you want to say. Mm-hmm. So I just lost my earbud. But then from an pure aspect of just watching a 2-minute video or minute and a half video, I see some more athleticism out of the new guys, the transfers, which is nice to see. I know people are comparing, who is it, Tajo? I think it's Chris Tajo to Tyler Cook a little bit. I think he's a little more versatile than Tyler Cook was. He's got a little bit more of an outside shot. Tyler was more of an inside, 5 feet and in type of player, more of a post player, heck of a dunker.
Yeah.
He had some of the most ferocious dunks I've seen in Iowa history outside of
Gary Wright.
Showing my age, Gary Wright and Reggie Evans. And I'd say there was another one that Doug Thomas. Thunder Doug had some massive dunks when he was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the athleticism I see out of that. I'm interested to see what Drew Thelwell has to bring to the table. Even if he brings just a defensive presence, that will be a huge help to this team. Doesn't necessarily have to be a scorer. It's nice when they do score because Iowa is an offensive team. They're always going to preach the offense first, defense. I'm never going to say that defense is not important to them because it is. Defense does win games, but when you focus on the offense as much as you do, your defense is probably not going to be. It's never going to look as good. And that's the other thing that, to me, skews the stats is Iowa's pace of play always makes their defensive stats look far worse than they probably really are because there's far more possessions in a game because of that. When you're shooting within 8 seconds in the shot clock, within the first 8 seconds of the shot clock, that's your average time of possession, you're going to have a lot more possessions to give up more points. So, people dogging on the Iowa defense, and yeah, there's a lot of times you see a lot of Ole defense, but I don't think the defensive stats are ever as bad as they show on paper because of pace of play. I could be wrong. People could disagree with me, but
no, I completely get it about the pace of play and having a lot more possessions per game than most of the teams and having their defense of other teams being compared to Iowa's defense when Iowa's defense is defending on more possessions. I get all that. But you've got more opportunities to make stops also. So really the chances of Iowa getting stops and having stops, they've got to put more emphasis on it. You're going to have to, I don't think you've got the offensive stars to win games on a consistent basis, 95 to 89 or 95-92 or something similar to that. That's not how I know Iowa's set up to play offense like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they need to play defense better than allowing 92 if they're scoring 95. They just or giving up 100 to their 95. So 1 or 2 stops a game more than what they had last year could really benefit them.
1 or 2 stops a game probably wins them 3 or 4 more games.
We talked about this on an earlier podcast that if they had 3 more stops, if you take 6 points or even 9 points, depending on the combination of 2s and 3s, if you take 9 or 6 points away from the other team, how many games would Iowa have won? They would have been solidly in the tournament.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been no problem at this point. So
you know, it's interesting.
Just turning that up a little bit would be a help. Having someone who is more defensive minded, having a team that's more defensive minded, putting in more of an emphasis on the defense. You can still play good offense, but just turn it up a little on the defensive end.
Well, and what's interesting is I feel like the basketball style is similar to like the Big 12's football style or other conferences' football style, where we don't care as much about defense because we have this potent offense. We're just going to hope that we can outscore you. And that's kind of what, sometimes you feel like when you're watching an Iowa basketball game, that's what it is we're just hoping we outscore you. We're not worried about stopping you as much as we can, but we know we can score. And it's like watching, and you think of it in the sense of that. People love watching those types of football games. I don't as much because I do value defense in football, but they don't like watching it that way when it comes to basketball. And I don't understand that. To me, it's more exciting to see those faster paced, higher scoring basketball games than it is to see a Virginia game where the game ends up, 48-44. 48-44, you're looking at what, 92 points total. And Iowa's games, how many times did Iowa average over 92 points a game? I would rather watch a game like that than a 48-42 or 48-44. But then when it comes to football, I would rather watch a 21-10 than a 55-51. Because I do value that defense. Because I do like watching the defense. I like watching the hits. I like, the quarterback sacks, that kind of stuff that really shows what your defense can do, and I think it's just because it's the Iowa way. Maybe it's the Iowa bias in me because I've watched Iowa basketball that's, fast paced and run up and down the court as fast as you can. Don't worry as much about trying to stop every time they go down the court. Just try to outscore them. And then you watch an Iowa football game, whereas, if you're giving up 3 points on the football side as a defense, you're probably pissed off.
Yeah.
So it's just, and it could just be the bias in me that I've watched so much Iowa football and basketball over the years that I've just kind of had that mentality ingrained in me. But I just enjoy those types of games more. Call me misogynistic when I say I love to watch an Iowa defensive game because there's not a lot of offense a lot of times, but I love watching them.
Yeah, I don't want this to turn into a basketball discussion, and we'll keep it shorter. But, if you're going to play the offensive philosophy that you're just going to outscore everybody, then you better have better offensive players than the other team.
Yeah.
And now Iowa doesn't seem like they have the offensive players that the Indianas, the Michigan States, the Purdue's of the world. So
consistent.
If you're going to have an offensive philosophy like that, you better have the horses to go with it because you're not going to be very successful.
It's not that they don't have scoring; it's the consistent scoring. You've got to have that. Every one of those teams had a guy that averaged 18 points a game, 20 points a game. You also had another guy that averaged 12. Iowa gets that combination of 2 or 3 guys that might fit that 12-point bit every now and then. There's just a lack of consistency of having that. And maybe this year you'll have Owen Freeman and we've got Peyton Sanford back, and maybe that's a good combination to build on. But I agree. You just have to have a consistent scoring offense. You don't have to be the highest scoring offense every time. Just consistent scoring offense and a solid defense. But again, I like watching it because I love the fast-paced games. So, and I think that's leading us into the women's. That's what I've always enjoyed about watching the women's games too. To me, women's games are played, obviously below the rim and are a little bit more fundamentally sound when it comes to their jumper, the layups, whatever. So that's what I enjoy. But I did love the Iowa philosophy of just get it down the court, and you're seeing that where, people are talking. I know we weren't going to talk about Caitlin Clark, and I'm not going to get into it. Just that, people from the outside are talking about her turnovers. Well, we put up with that at Iowa because we had the horses that could score, and we could just kind of get around that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't worry so much. I still don't worry about her turnovers. I don't think most of them are hers anyway, but irrelevant to our conversation. I did see the pictures and the videos come out from their summer workouts as well. Nice to see some of the new faces in there. Sad to see Ava Jones having to hang it up medically. Kind of expected it, but I really would like to have seen the girl get on the court at least even if for 30 seconds in her career, just to have in the books.
Yeah. You can't help but feel sorry for her. I mean, but luckily, one good thing is Iowa stepping up and saying we'll continue your scholarship for the rest of however long you want to be here. Yeah, that's a class thing to do. Some institutions would or maybe wouldn't do that or have policies against that. But I'm glad Iowa stepped up and said, yeah, you can come here to school and we'll honor your scholarship. And, it was an unfortunate situation that happened to them and her losing her dad and getting messed up and working her way back to where she can at least, be somewhat functional is a tremendous kudos to her for all the hard work that she's done in the year and a half, 2 years since the accident. But, it's so tremendously difficult for her to go through life with, not 100% functionality and losing the love of the game and the passion you have for the game and not be able to play. But it is nice to have the education and having that paid for. So good for Iowa.
And that's
go ahead.
Yeah, to say that's a testament to Lisa Bluter and now Jan Jansen that they honored
Absolutely.
that, because a lot of universities would have just cut her loose.
Right.
A lot of universities probably would have cut her loose after the accidents and would not honored her scholarship in the first place. And I'm not going to name any universities like that, but there are those out there that you can speculate on. But kudos to the staff for sticking with her. It's just a sad situation all around. But as I said before, it was good to see the new faces out there. So seeing Ava Hayden, she's a pretty tall girl.
Yeah. I did see Lucy Olson was there. I didn't see pictures of her, but I did see an interview with her that, she's on campus and they asked some questions about how she came to get the call from Lisa about Jan taking over, and it's pretty seamless. And she just said, no, I'm still in. And it was kind of a nice little article. I'm not sure it was the Iowa Report or Hawkeye Report. Somebody had it. I'd recommend you go look through it and read it. But she seems like a class act. It's unfortunate she's only going to have the 1 year at Iowa. But we're looking forward to having that 1 year and having it be pretty special, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're solidly a tournament team again. Yeah. I don't know that, obviously the expectations or the bar is not set at a national championship appearance coming into this year. But, stranger things have happened. We weren't expecting it 2 years ago. So anything can happen.
And with losing, the two girls that we lost last year,
three,
Sonano and Warnock.
The previous year.
I kind of expected them to take a little step back, but they didn't, and they got
actually took a step forward,
closer than what. Yeah, really. It would have been nice to have Sonano have another year. That would have. I think Iowa would have probably won the tournament this year.
Yeah, I think so too. That's not a knock on Monica or McKenna. To say that they probably took a step forward this year based on how they played. It was a more productive year. Yeah. Now, granted, they got to the same spot and they had the same postseason accolades, Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament, but from the season as a whole, it just, and maybe it was the schedule, maybe it was, the difference in some of the people that graduated the year before, transfers, things like that made some of those games that maybe would have been more difficult a little more easy. You never know. And you can't speculate on that either. But it's not a knock on Sonano or Warnock at all that they were better this year. You're right. I think with both of them back, they're probably definitely they're probably winning the national championship because of that experience and being able to know what to do. And again, and that's not a knock on the players that were there this year either. So
when you've got a Sonano and Clark you've got to kind of almost pick your poison there at times. So, if you're going to double on Clark, then Sonano's wide open under the basket, or she's only single team down there. She's good enough that she's going to get position. She's smart enough to get position to get a basket underneath. Well, if you double her, then you got left Caitlin with a, like a screen up top, and she's open for 3. Or you put that added expertise or you pick your poison from one more year in this year, and Well,
throw in the fact you also would have had Kate Martin.
Yeah.
Gabby Marshall. If you double down low and you single on Caitlin, somebody's open. And you're going to pick your poison with them too. It's not, Kate Martin's no slouch by any means. She's proven that in the WNBA. Obviously, Gabby Marshall, once March hit, that was her time. So you had a lot of options, and they still do. I think they have a lot of options still going in. They've got a lot of good shooters, people who I think haven't really had the opportunity because the players that they've had there. But I think you're going to see.
You're going to see some people step up that you haven't seen step up before. I 100%, and they need to. Absolutely. I don't think the team's going to be able to go with Lucy Olson and then Hannah Stolke. You're going to have to see Taylor McCabe hit some important shots from the corners. You're going to need to have Kylie Feuerbach in there and hitting some shots. You're going to need to see exactly Sydney. They're just going to have to contribute a little bit more than what they have had to in the past. And that's just, the Caitlin Clark, she leaves, and that's a big void to fill. And you're going to have to figure out if you can fill it. You can't fill it with one person. Obviously, that's not going to work. But you can get 2 or 3 people in there to make up for some of that. Yeah. I don't think they'll average
they'll be exciting to watch
the last 2 years, but they'll be good. I think defenses are going to have to be more honest. But
I agree.
Anyway, summer workouts.
Well, let's move on.
And they're in the book.
Yes. Let's move on to the football schedule. So I'm going to put up this spreadsheet that you sent me.
We're not going to spend nearly as much time on this as we did last week. I don't want to bore a bunch of people. I know there were some comments and some things off the line that we were told that just got a little bit long for them, and that's fine. We'll shorten it up this year or this week.
Yeah. So if you want to take a look at this in more depth, pause your screen and take a look. This is JD's predictions. I did not put a spreadsheet together. I'm kind of not really ready to make my predictions on every team yet. I want to see after the Big 10 road crew goes out for the summer. I want to see how that goes. Then I'll have a better idea. I have an idea in my head of how good some of these teams might be. Some of these might be sneaky good or better than we anticipated based on transfers, based on coaching changes, based on schedule. So I want to make my more in-depth predictions probably more in August after we've had a chance to see those, and I do watch those on the other teams as well. But let's just go through this real quick. You have in alphabetical order, it looks like. Yep. So you've got Illinois going 6-6. I would probably at this point would agree with that. Maybe 5-7. I think there's a team that you have them beating that's probably going to sneak up and beat them. Maybe Purdue. I think Purdue's going to be better than people think they're going to be. So I think we're pretty close on that. I'd say the big games for them, they have 3 games in 4 weeks that are very, very huge for them, which is at Penn State, Michigan, and at Oregon. And not discount the at Nebraska either.
Yeah, they got a pretty rough schedule there. Yeah, that little snippet there of 5 games is tough.
I think of the Big 10 teams, they have probably one of the tougher schedules in the conference for sure. And I don't.
Yeah, but you have to look at where they're at too. So. Some of those are home games. Some of them are away games, like Nebraska, Penn State, both away. They do have Purdue and Michigan
Oregon
home,
away,
and they do Oregon away. So Nebraska, Penn State, and Oregon being away is pretty. That's a rough away schedule for that. And your other away game would be Rutgers and Northwestern, which I don't think is going to be as bad. But we don't know yet either what Northwestern's going to look like, or even Rutgers going to look like with a new quarterback. I know Northwestern's got one of their quarterbacks coming back, but
and like we talked earlier, Illinois does have the returning quarterbacks, so
yeah, they've got
that is a
two of them,
plus for
really.
them. So, yeah, technically, yes. So that is a plus for them, and they are one of the few teams in the conference that does have a returning starting quarterback. I think it was Illinois, Purdue, and Penn State were the only three teams with a returning starting quarterback outside of, yes, technically Iowa, because Tate McNamara was the starter. But as we saw, he didn't get to play much, so you kind of had to think more of Deacon Hill being the starter for the year. So I'll say that with an asterisk by it. How's that?
Yeah, I agree.
So we move on to Indiana. You have Indiana at 3-9. I can't say as I disagree with that. I don't think Indiana's going to be that good. It's a new coach, new quarterback, and it is not an easy schedule.
Right.
Nothing really. They have a very tough stretch with at Michigan State, at Michigan, at Ohio State. That's not going to be easy.
No.
They do get Nebraska and Washington at home. They might get the Washington game, but I don't have a lot of confidence in Indiana yet, because I don't know what we're going to see out of them. I don't know what they're going to look like. It's a brand new coaching staff, new philosophy, everything. They're a wild card. I just don't anticipate a lot, because I don't know what they had. They had a lot of guys transfer out too. So 3-9 is probably about right. We'll skip over Iowa for now. 10-2, I probably agree with that. We'll go to Maryland at 7-5. Yeah, I can see that. I think 7-5 is right, but I think they probably lose at Virginia, and they probably, maybe 6-6. Yeah, I'd say they probably.
Well, I've got them losing there at Virginia too.
Yeah, you're probably right. 7-5 is probably right. Tough stretch for them might be the at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, and at Penn State was their toughest stretch at the end of the season. So I don't know if they'll beat Rutgers, but it's at home, so that is a toss-up game to me. That's kind of where I think maybe the 7-5, 6-6. You have Michigan at 9-3. I am probably more on an 8-4 side of that, although they do have a fairly easy schedule. I don't think they're beating USC at home. That's why I think they're 8-4. Again, breaking in a new quarterback, or breaking in, and yes, you've got a new coach, but he was on the staff last year, but he wasn't. He did do have some head coaching experience, filling in for Khaki Pants.
Yeah. But it is Michigan.
It is Michigan, but that's USC is going to be a better team. They're breaking in a new quarterback as well, but I don't know. That's 4 games in. It'll be interesting. That one's a toss-up to me. I think you're right on with the rest of these. I think Texas, Oregon, Ohio State are better than they are. It's that USC game might be the difference between 9-3, 8-4. We move on to Michigan State. You have them at 3-9. I personally think they're going to be better than that. I think they brought in a lot of transfers from Oregon State, so you've got a familiarity with the coaching staff. You've got a familiarity with the system. So I think they're going to beat Boston College. I think they'll beat either Purdue or Illinois. So I'm going to say they're probably 4-8, 5-7, possibly 6-6. They might sneak up and beat somebody else, maybe a Rutgers at home. So I think they're one of those teams that's sneakily better than what we think they are.
Okay, we'll see.
Tough stretch here between Ohio State at Oregon, Iowa at Michigan. That's a brutal stretch. Moving on to Minnesota, you have them at 5-7. That's fair. I see the wins. I would maybe go 4-8, because I don't know if they'll beat Rutgers at Rutgers. But
Minnesota always wins a game they're not supposed to win, though. That's kind of why I threw them in there.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not at Iowa, or against Iowa, I should say. I don't think it will be, but I didn't think it would be last year either. So
Iowa's going to have a little motivation there.
Yeah. Well, Iowa's got to have a little offense. I think that's going to happen this year. Let's see their tough stretch: Iowa at Michigan, USC, and then the end of season at Penn State at Wisconsin. That's going to be a tough little stretch too. So I think that's 5 losses right there out of the 7. Moving on to Nebraska. Nebraska has a better schedule this year than they've had in the past. They do have Colorado at home. I am not sold on Colorado. I'm not sold on Deion Sanders like a lot of people are. I'm not sold on Shedeur Sanders as being a top 3 quarterback in the country. I think you've got to have an offensive line that can protect him. I don't know that he will survive the year as the starter because he might get hurt. I'm not sold on Colorado at all. But again, they're going to be a completely new team as well. They're living the philosophy of, get rid of everybody and bring in everybody new each year to see what we can get. But I'd say 7-5 is probably a very fair spot to put them in.
At end of the season is really rough.
Yeah.
Starting at Ohio State
5 games.
Yeah, and then at USC, Wisconsin, at Iowa. That's 3 out of your last 4. Actually, 3 out of your last 5 are away. So, and those are not good, easy games. And then having UCLA in there.
Yeah. Is it going to be a letdown coming off of an Ohio State game where UCLA might get an upset? Because I'm not sold on UCLA being very good this year either.
It could happen.
Yeah.
I got them winning because they're home.
And that's probably fair.
And UCLA doesn't like to play on the road in cold weather.
Yeah, and that is a later game, so that is an advantage.
Not too late. It shouldn't be too bad. It might be one of them days where it's 40 degrees and rainy, or it could be 65 degrees and sunny.
Yep. Moving on to Northwestern, you say 3-9.
I think Northwestern might be a little bit better than this, but they just have a pretty rough schedule. I think Duke will be better than them. I think at Washington, that's a rough one. Traveling across the country for that. At Maryland's rough. Wisconsin at home is rough. I mean, just show me there, outside of at Purdue, or maybe Illinois at home, where's their next win going to be?
I think they'll beat Washington. I think Washington is the type of team with a new staff, new players, basically all new team. It's going to take them a few games to gel. And, they're bringing in talent. It's just new talent. So by the 4th game of the year,
Bluetooth disconnected.
They're probably not gelling yet. I'd say they're more of a mid-season type of team that's probably going to start hitting their stride about the time their schedule gets hard, like really difficult. And they're probably not going to win those games either. So that's why I don't have Washington as high as you do. But I think Northwestern is not going to be as good as last year, but they're not going to be a 3-9 team. I look for more as a 5-7. I don't see, as of right now, I don't see maybe Maryland, Purdue, Illinois, Washington. Any one of those games could be swing games for them. You get 2 of those 4, you're 5-7. So
and you lose a quarterback and you're done for the season probably.
Yeah.
So
but that can be said for a lot of these teams. That can be said for a lot of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
So moving to the bottom half, we have Ohio State. You've got them 11-1. I agree 100%. I agree with your predictions on that. The only one I might say maybe might keep them from being 11-1 is at Penn State. Penn State having a returning quarterback, that's kind of a toss-up game, but it is later in the year, and we do know both teams have a lot of talent. It's just going to be a matter of how quickly has that talent come out. They're bringing in a transfer quarterback. Yes, a very successful transfer quarterback, but it is also a different system. But Ohio State went out and got Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator, and that is a similar system to what Will Howard has run. So it may not be a close game at Penn State. I don't know. I want to make my predictions prefaced off of what I see in the summer with the Big 10 tour, but I think that's kind of a more of a 60-40, 50-50 type of game that could go either way at this point. And they do have fairly workable schedule. They have Iowa at home. They get Michigan at home. The two games that at Oregon, at Penn State are the difficult ones on their schedule. Moving on to Oregon. You have them losing at Michigan. 11-1 is a fair place to put them. They could be 12-0. I don't know that Michigan will beat them. But
well, I didn't want to have everybody undefeated,
Right, and you could flip flop the Ohio State Michigan game,
Yeah, I mean, I could
although
have
Ohio State does have to go out to Oregon.
I'd have to have. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I have it the way it is.
Oregon playing at Wisconsin late in the season is, that's a wild card as well when it comes to the weather. Now,
depends on how bad
I think people
Wisconsin
do
get beat up in the season.
Yeah, and I think people put too much stock into weather with some of these teams because kids are nationally recruited. They played in this weather before, so it's not like you're taking kids that have played mainly on the West Coast in Southern California and saying, now go play in the brutal winter in Wisconsin. Well, you got guys that are coming from Michigan, guys that are coming from Wisconsin that have played in it. So I think there's too much emphasis put on people putting the weather as a big, huge factor. It is a factor for a lot of teams, though. So I'm not going to totally discount it, but I think you could potentially flip flop the Ohio State Michigan games. That's why I said Oregon Penn State for the Ohio State season. You could flip flop them. Maybe it's 11-1's probably a fair statement. They could be a 12-0 team. One of those two could be 12-0. And I think it's fair to say that Ohio State, Oregon, and then we'll talk here about Penn State, I think, are the top three in the conference. So any one of those three, could be in the Big Ten title game this year.
Yeah.
Which leads us into Penn State with a returning quarterback who was successful last year. You say 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking they could be 11-1 as well. I don't know that at USC is a loss. I don't know what about USC enough right now at this point. I have to see what this new quarterback has. They don't have Caleb Williams anymore. Even with Caleb Williams, USC was a 7-5 team last year. So
I could have flip-flopped at Wisconsin too and put them as a loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's several games that are swing games here and that is a pretty rough stretch. At USC, at Washington, or at Wisconsin, and then home against Ohio State. As you say, it depends on how badly teams get beat up in those games. And we're prefacing on everybody's available, nobody gets hurt. That's obviously how you do it when you're predicting in the spring, that nobody's going to be injured. You're always going to have, you're going to have your starters, your stars. Somebody's going to be hurt. One of these teams is going to fall completely off from what we predict because of injuries. So, but I would say 10-2, 11-1 is probably very fair for that as well. Purdue, you say 5-7. I'm thinking 6-6 because I said I think they'll sneak up and beat. I think they'll beat Illinois at Illinois. I think there's just that different contrasting styles in play. Purdue is more the wide open. If they can just get enough defense, you had Illinois' running back last year transferred to Purdue this year. So, I to me, I give the advantage to Purdue in that game. So that's why I say that I feel they're more of a 6-6 team, but they do have a pretty rough schedule as well. Notre Dame, at Oregon State, at Wisconsin, at Ohio State, home against Oregon. That is not an easy schedule. And I'm not guaranteeing that they'll beat Michigan State at Michigan State. That could be, that could be the difference between 5-5 or 5-7 and 6-6 as well. So moving on to Rutgers. Not sure what to expect out of Rutgers this year, losing their starter. I wasn't sold on him last year. as much as some people were. Maybe it's what's the old expression?
Addition by subtraction.
Addition by subtraction. Yeah, exactly. 6-6 might be generous with their schedule, but it could be overlooking them. I just don't know. I don't
like
see
Greg
them
Schiano.
losing.
I think he's a good coach, and he'll get them where they need to be. But
I don't see him losing at Minnesota or at home against Minnesota. Sorry, I don't see him losing against Minnesota. That would be a 7-5 team then if everything else held true. But you could always flip flop Virginia Tech and Minnesota too. At Virginia Tech, you got them winning that. I don't know if that's possible, if that's going to happen. But you flip flop that, they're still a 6-6 team. So it's could go anyway. They could beat Washington at home. Probably should beat Washington at home at that point. I talked about that earlier. With teams getting to play earlier in the season against some of these teams that have got new quarterbacks, new coaches, new offenses being put in. That early part of the season is going to be when you want to get them. Later in the season, that's going to be tough. They have their tough stretch. They really don't have a really brutal stretch that extends multiple games. I mean, at Nebraska, home against Wisconsin, at USC is probably their worst or their toughest stretch.
Yeah.
So Rutgers could be, should be a bowl team. I think 6-6, 7-5 is definitely a bowl team for them. Moving on to UCLA, you and I both talked about UCLA. Don't think there's much there in the cupboard this year. It's going to take them a few years to maybe get back to where they were a few years ago, which was kind of a 7-5, 6-6, 8-4 type of team. 3-9. Yeah, I don't know. 2-10 maybe. I don't know if they're going to beat Fresno State. The rest of their schedule is pretty bad. They might, I'm not sold on Minnesota. I'm just not sold on them at all. So, a lot of these swing games, I'm looking at Minnesota thinking, it could be a win there, that you've got them as a loss. So, but yeah, they've got a rough stretch with at LSU, Oregon, at Penn State, and they go to Rutgers, Nebraska, Iowa. And then they finish up with at Washington at home against USC. And the home game against Fresno. That's a pretty brutal stretch. Yeah. That's a rough schedule. Next, we have USC. Again, got the benefit of being able to play their Midwest and East Coast teams at home or early in the season. So they don't have to play, that weather's not going to be a huge factor for them in most games. Their latest game is at Nebraska. Or no, I'm sorry, that is at home against Nebraska. So their last 4 games are on the West Coast. Yeah, that's being nice to them. But the early portion of their schedule is going to be tough. LSU at Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State. That's not an easy schedule. So 8-4 might be generous.
Top heavy.
Yeah, 7-5 is probably more like it. Again, not knowing what their quarterback's going to be like is difficult. Moving on to Washington, you have them at 6-6. I don't have them that high. I don't think they're going to be that good. Again, I think they're going to gel later in the season. I think they lose at Rutgers and against Northwestern. So I think they're more of a 4-8 team. Could be wrong. It's not knowing what their philosophy is going to be, what their team's going to look like. It's difficult. They did lose a ton from last year. It's hard to say that the team's going to go from a national championship appearance to a 4-8 season, but I think this is a team that could do that. But 4-8 to 6-6 is probably is a fair assessment on what we know at this point. They have a pretty tough stretch at Rutgers, home against Michigan, at Iowa, and then home against USC and at Penn State, and finish up at Oregon. That's pretty difficult. And, Washington State's never a pushover for them either. And then we end up with Wisconsin. You're 9-3. I don't know that they're that good. I want to see their quarterback. I don't know. Is he a transfer from? I don't even know where he's coming in from. I know it's a smaller school, if I remember right. Tyler Van Dyke.
I thought he was there last year. I thought Mordecai went somewhere else last year.
No. But they say he's a step above Tanner Mordecai as far as talent. He was at Miami, I guess. I don't think Miami's team was all that good, so it's difficult to assess that. Again, it might be one of those situations where you need to catch them early. That later in the year it's going to be difficult, and their early season is some of their tougher games. Alabama, kudos to Alabama for going to Wisconsin. You at USC, that's going to be a tougher game for them earlier in the season. Home against Penn State, they have that. Home against Oregon is beneficial, but I do agree with you. I think they lose both those games. At Iowa, I'm not sure on that being a win for them.
I couldn't put Iowa at 11-1 though.
No, it's hard to because they may beat a Wisconsin, but they may lose to a team that they shouldn't. Like Nebraska. But I would agree with the rest of these. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're pretty close. We're pretty close as far as what we think. There's just a couple of teams I think are a little better than what you predict them to be. And again, like I said, we're prefacing this by saying that we're going on the pretense that nobody's injured when these games happen. So we know that's never the case. Injuries always happen. Key guys are out for certain games that will definitely swing one of these games in somebody's favor. So take them with a grain of salt. It's just fun to kind of go through this and look at it and say, okay, yeah, I agree, or I don't. I think this team's a little bit better. So, yeah, I think we should wrap it up on that.
If you can drop down on that, I'll have you do the predictions of 1 through 18, and that's how I put them in.
I think that's probably
Oregon and Ohio State be in the championship game.
I think that's fair. Any one of the top three could probably switch places with each other at this point based on their schedule. I think they are clearly the top three teams going into the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the tier of Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, USC is probably tier 2, and I don't want to put that as a negative. Let's say this is the A+ tier. This is probably the A tier. Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers is probably the B tier. I would probably have Purdue ahead of Minnesota and ahead of Washington. So I'd say maybe Illinois, Purdue, Washington, Northwestern is C's, and then the rest of them are, to me, and I hate to use the hot word, but they're hot garbage this year. I'm just not sold on them. So, just a few that I'd probably flip flop. But it's subjective. Just like any rankings are subjective, but fun to do.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up on that. We do have a question of the week. We did not do that last week. For those of you that are new to the podcast, just now starting to catch us on YouTube, we do a question of the week where we ask you maybe a trivia question, or we'll ask you something along the lines of what your favorite ritual is on game day. This week, I'll let you handle the question of the week, and we want you to put these in the comments. You can put them in the comments here on YouTube, or you can put them on. I'll put the links for our Facebook, our Twitter, Spotify, all the links that you can listen to us at, or you can share information with us at, or you want to comment at. We'll put those in there and drop us a line at any one of those areas. But I'll let you handle the question of the week this week.
Okay, we're going to go with this question of the week. Either at home or at the game, what are 3 tailgate items or foods or drinks that you have to make it a successful tailgate? In other words, what are the 3 things you absolutely have to have a tailgate? So let us know what it is in the comments. It could be you got to have a special meat or a couple special meats. I don't know whether you want alcohol of some sort or soda of some sort. Just let us know what the 3 items you have to make it a successful tailgate, either at home or at the game.
Yep. And we'll start out next week's podcast with our must-haves. And it's been a while since I tailgated. I will admit I haven't been to a game since 2019. I'm a lot older than I was back then, and that walk from Finkbine it's not easy to do anymore. So, but as I said before, now if you're new to this channel, like and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, comments. We love to have comments. Tell us what you think we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you'd like to see us do differently, maybe some area of Iowa sports that you'd like to see us cover more or less. Just give us some ideas. Let us know what you think, and definitely hit the subscribe button. We want to have some subscribers and know that you're out there listening. And you don't have to let us know your name, but let us know where you're listening from too. That would be nice to know too. So with that, we'll wrap it up for this week, and we will catch up to you next week. And have a great week. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.